And you can. You only have to have a public hearing on the fee resolution. You can chase fees throughout the year if you like, but if it goes up by 5% or more, or it is a new fee, then you have to have a public hearing.
Got that. So if we
Reduced it down.
administratively or legislatively wanted to reduce what we had previously had a hearing for,
Certainly.
what's the process? Can we
Certainly.
just charge less?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, and I think the nail was hit on the head. These are not giant revenue sources for the city. It is merely trying to bring some equality, some balance, seeking that council direction as to what level of subsidy do you wish to make to the farmer's market. And as we talked about at committee on Monday, is it the social event for 26 weeks that the council feels it should subsidize 50%? Well, if you're going to subsidize 50%, then we still aren't at that amount.
I got it.
If you're subsidizing 70%, we're probably getting close. So that direction. So I agree with you, Tom. It's not a huge revenue source.
So, okay, so from a policy, I'm sorry, I'm going to
Please
keep
go ahead,
going.
go ahead.
So from a policy perspective, the idea, the notion of trying to recoup expenses through the generation of revenue through fees rather than subsidizing through general taxes, I get that. It makes sense. I think that all makes sense. I'm trying to get at the more specific question of the charging of the fee and the increase of fees on the actual payer of those fees, the vendors. So, I mean, if we wanted to be fair from a revenue expense thing, we might be charging $800 a year, right? So, just for
An argument
conversation,
could be made, yeah.
right? That would be a really huge increase from $200 to $800. That would be what, 4 times as much? So that's 200% increase. 400. Yeah,
Whatever.
400%. So that's not what I'm suggesting we do. What I'm asking is if we recognize that we made a mistake in communication with the Farmers Market Advisory Board and the vendors and so forth, and I take some of that responsibility because I'm the liaison to the Farmers Market Advisory Board. If we say, hey, maybe we didn't communicate well enough and we wanted to try to correct that, if correct is the correct term, and say only charge $250 instead of $312, could we do that tonight administratively or legislatively and just make that decision, or do we then have to post another public hearing and et cetera, et cetera? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Gary?
The answer is yes, you can do that. Direct staff to do what the council wants, as long as you're not raising the fee above 5%, or
the
you're not
312.
creating a new fee. You may direct staff to lower that fee to anything below the published adopted amount that's in the fee resolution. I would caution you though, that's the purpose of doing it tonight. There was a concern that nothing had been said, that the vendors didn't have their say. That is one of the reasons that we set this up, was to have the vendors be able to come in, talk to the council, well knowing the council can make adjustments at any time.
Yeah, I get. Okay, thanks.
Sue, I saw your hand next.
Well, I think there's been two different, well, I guess one was a question, was a policy statement. So this, and this might be to Kathleen, this might be to Gary, but this fee increase does not cover the actual, well, when you went back and calculated the hidden costs that we had not been calculating before, this fee increase does not cover, does not cover those hidden costs. Only a portion of those hidden costs, all of those hidden costs.
Well, if you just look at the top of the slide, the staff expenses is again, the market coordinator, the sound technician, my hours, and my arts assistant hours. Okay.
Excuse me if I can clarify.
Was that, I guess what I'm asking is what you had calculated from years before, and this year when you recalculated the cost?
This year when we recalculated the costs, we actually put my my hours in this, as well as my arts assistant.
So
Farmers market hours.
Yes.
do these new fees cover the newly discovered, uncovered?
No.
No, thank you.
No,
That's
it's
what I
not.
wanted to know. Doesn't
No,
cover them all.
there's like
Okay.
21,000
So I think
there.
what Gary was saying was that the council has to decide at which point are we going to cover 50%, 75%, subsidize, whatever. The city subsidizes the pool, the city subsidizes the 1912 building, and the city subsidizes the farmer's market, because we all think that these things are quite valuable. I think part of the problem is when my property taxes are going to be raised, I get a notice of what my building's worth, and then when there's a bond or something, I get to vote on it. So I know I'm raising my taxes X amount, and I get a notice saying this is how much your taxes are probably going to be, and I can get ready for it. I think what happened with the communication breakdown and with the not being consulted is insulting to the intelligence and hurts the vendors and the farmers market committee. Now, council, boy, we've done that a lot of times before. Planning and zoning, we've done that a lot of times before. You know, wrote up a perfectly good ordinance we thought was good for the city and didn't consult anybody, and we all agreed among ourselves it was wonderful, and then it hit the fan. So part of it is a respect thing. And yes, we done wrong. Yes, we admit it, but we have to get past that. We have to get past hurt feelings and process, make sure that the process is respectful and inclusive and predictable, just like we tried to do with the uniform code. Uniform building code is for contractors who want to say, this is what we expect, not that there's a hidden code over here that you have to do and something that you can't find. So I think that the balance and predictability and consistency is really important. And however, you know, my favorite line, the tooth fairy's not coming. We can't, there aren't a lot of federal grants out there as they start cutting the budgets for us to bring in more money, more money, more money. And I can see where we have the streets people, we don't have enough money to pave our streets, and so we want to make sure that money we could be putting into streets isn't taken out of the streets fund because we're paying people to do the streets for the farmers market. So I can see where the fee increases are necessary. But if I were a farmers market vendor, I would want to know, okay, I'm willing to bite the bullet because the costs really are there. I'm willing to bite the bullet this year, but I don't want to hear 55% next year. I think that's kind of a problem that, oh boy, what's coming down the pike? I need to make my plans now for what I'm going to do. So actually, I think, even though it hurts, just like when we pass a school bond and my taxes take a big hit, I think in order to be reasonable and recover some of the costs, I think the fee resolution is a good one. It's going to be painful, but it's manageable. At some point, we'll get to the point where the city can't afford to subsidize, and then it would, as Tom says, make it up $800. That would be ridiculous. So I think the city has learned some lessons about inclusiveness and respect and planning and predictability, and I think we've also learned that we just can't keep subsidizing things by going, oh yeah, the street guys, they'll cover this, they'll do that. Because at some point, we burn people out. And we burn, like one of the reasons why your assistant has more hours, because you can see the fuse at both ends, and when she's working is just, you know, I could do that a couple Saturdays, but I couldn't do it 26 weeks a year every year. So I think we've learned a lesson here, and I think we'll be more inclusive, but I think this resolution is a good one. So I'm in favor of continuing it.
Okay, Tim?
Well, we've had a lot of discussion here the last few minutes. We don't have a motion on the, okay. I think we should, I'm going to put forth a motion, and then we can discuss some more, yes. The Public Works Finance Committee meeting did review and accept the recommendation to confirm the farmers market report. So I move that we accept the report with the recommendation to confirm the 2013 farmer market fees as they were contained in the FY 2013 fee resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have Tim's motion, we have Dan's second. Further discussion. Dan?
At the meeting last week, a lot of interesting ideas came forward, and, there was something about a senior discount, there was something about a kid's discount, or or splitting the booths, different things like that. Maybe even, we talked about earlier how the size had nothing to do with the fees, it had to do with, just what fits. But maybe there's some discussion about sizes still in the future. And I think that, we talked that there's the farmer's market strategic plan meeting later this week. That's where I think these options need to come forward. And we could have a whole different mess next year to come up with I'm not saying mess like it's going to be a mess, but 2014 is going to be different than 2013 just because of these farmers market strategic plan meetings. We're gonna come up with different ideas from what happens there. So I think that's where those ideas need to come forward, and bring back towards us. We may come up with the idea that we're gonna, the idea is that we're gonna subsidize it more. We might reduce fees for next year. Who's to say what comes out of this? But, I'm interested in seeing what does come out of this. But like Sue said, we're trying to recoup some of the costs that we've never tracked until about 3 years ago. And these things, they just catch up with you eventually. And that's what we need to do. It has nothing to do with the dogs, has nothing to do with the move to Main Street. Those things happen after the mayor and the department heads all sat down together and started putting the budget together. So that all came after the budget was actually set for, and the fees were talked about last year. So I think that we're just going to have to move forward with what we've got and hope for the best.
Wayne?
Thank you, Mayor. I made a few comments at the meeting on Monday, and I'll reiterate those a little bit, I think. It seems like we get into our major discussions over what, in the grand scheme of things, are small things. $5 a day increase. We talk about 55%. Now, that sounds like a lot of money. $5 a day, $1 an hour, if you're open 5 hours. I almost feel like this is starting to equate itself to the position that the federal government is in. Services and demands by the population and not a desire to pay for them. We have to have a balanced budget. We, as a council, as a legislative body, have to look at the entire city of Moscow and the expenses that go for the entire population. And there's a lot of people that go to the farmers market. There's no question about that. But there's a lot of people that don't go to the farmers market. And we're also spending their money to subsidize the farmers market. And I think that's okay to a point, because eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have to make a decision as to how much money we're actually going to subsidize it at. I've said this privately, and I think I've said it maybe publicly a couple of times. I think the solution eventually is going to be for the farmers market to become its own private entity. Take the ball and run with it with city support, and get the city out of the business of being the farmers market. That may be the ultimate solution down the road, but until such time, we still have to be responsible to all the taxpayers in Moscow as to how we're spending their money. I question how many people up and down my street would be happy that we're spending $55,000 a year right now on the farmers market if they don't go to it. So that's kind of where we're at, and I will have to support the motion.
just to set people's minds at ease, we do have a balanced budget, in case they're
Absolutely.
wondering about that.
Oh, yeah.
It is balanced.
That's how we do
Yeah,
it.
so that's, in that one way, we are different from the federal government.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. But, you were talking about subsidization. We're at the swimming pool. There are probably a lot more people who don't swim, too, than who do. But that's a different animal for some reason. Walter?
The state does have a balanced budget.
Well, I meant it in a little bit different tone, but yeah, you're
Maybe
right.
not balanced like you'd like it balanced, but it is balanced. I like what Wayne said. I think possibly heading toward a nonprofit, freestanding, vendor-operated board of operation might be the way to go. I had a very long conversation with a vendor that called me this week, and that was, she didn't say it that way, but the criticism of the way the city is managing the market kind of pointed me in the direction of, well, if the vendors can do it better, I'd encourage them to consider doing it. With city support, we've still got to provide certain things, police, fire, streets, et cetera. I understand that. My math, and far be it from me to argue with Don Palmer, especially when he's not here, but it's a lot easier that way.
Award-winning. Award-winning Don Palmer.
I get about double the $2,500. I'm up at $5,276, and that's not counting any of the non-vendor stuff that's $1 here and $1 there. So it's not quite as bad as I was making on earlier. I will support the motion. I think we've learned our lesson about following our own rules regarding transparency and informing people of what we're doing, and I think I'll probably have to read the fee resolution a little closer next year.
All 8,000 items.
All 8,000 items.
Tom?
Well, I'm not opposed to raising the fees. I guess what I'd like to see us do is just to reduce the rate of increase and spread it, say over this year and next year or something instead. But, my preference would be that we go back and try to, fix the bad communication and the poor feelings that have been generated over the past year among vendors, and just make sure that we're working together as a team. I think in the long run, it's going to be seen to be still affordable, but, that's not, I'm not the one running the specific vendor booth, so it's hard, it's easier for me to try to put myself in the shoes of the vendor than not, so. But that's where I fall in opposition to it. Other than that, I think it makes sense for us to make sure that the rates change, but I'd like to see it at a slower rate. So that's my difference.
And I do have to say, I think the issue about improved communications and, interacting with the vendors who are most directly affected by this and other stakeholders, that's going to be important. And I think we have all heard that loudly and clearly over the course of these weeks of more recent discussions. So that goes without a vote. That'll happen for sure. Wayne?
As I said earlier, it seems like such a small amount, and obviously it's not, in the grand scheme of the city budget, it's not a huge amount one way or the other either. Perhaps as a public relations move, and I think the city council needs to be aware of things of that nature too, I could probably support Tom. Maybe we back off a little bit. You're talking 250 or 260 this year with the additional increase the year following, or as deemed necessary, with conversation with the Farmers Market Advisory Board, understanding that it's an advisory board and not a policy-making board. But I would support reducing it to 260, say.
Yeah, I
this
would
year.
prefer that we do that.